Hello YouTube, I am the Crimson Critic, and today we are going to be talking about Little Nightmares. Little Nightmares is a puzzle platformer published by Bandai Namco. It was released in 2017 to very positive reviews, and since has developed prequels, sequels, and even comic books. And with a third game coming out, I would kinda like to talk about how Little Nightmares 1 was very revolutionary in the original horror industry. Even to support this, I'm still going to do one more thing afterwards once we've hit the big milestone of 100 subscribers, because we are like 8 subscribers away, and I thank everybody for whoever does subscribe and whoever likes the videos. I've had so many bloody positive comments on stuff, and I'm really excited to hit it, but I'm going to kind of do like a celebratory stream where I play Little Nightmares 2, because I've not played that as current day. I've played parts of it, but I don't think I got even like 25% through. So when we hit 100 subscribers, that's what I'm going to do, because I think I stopped streaming around late last year, and I kind of want to get back into it, but I don't want to waste my time if no one want to watch it, of course. Other than that, let's get into the content. Probably the best place to start, which is going to contain spoilers, is the plot. And the plot is mainly about a little girl called Six who is very hungry and needs to escape this place called the Maw, which is kind of like a cruise kind of thing where they go underwater and there's these monstrous kind of beings that are in here. I'm not sure how to kind of talk about them because there are different ones. I might talk about some of the main ones separately because I think some of them are really cool. And there's this one main one called the Lady who Six basically needs to kill to get off. The main game does consist of Six basically traveling and getting across the Maw, trying to survive as long as she can against all these different beings that are on it. But she ends up kind of getting a thirst and needing to eat quite a lot. So you basically have, I don't think it's a main part of the game as such, but it's kind of like you need to feed yourself at certain parts of the game without dying, and you have a struggle that you can see Six is facing, but a lot of it feels kind of whimsical while you're walking around, and a lot of the game takes place within a few hours of whatever Six is traversing. I've been struggling to talk about this one for a bit. I've been kind of talking for about 10 minutes by myself, and I don't get really anywhere, but we'll keep going. I think the art style is probably the main thing most people are going to play this game for, because being something tiny in a huge world full of these hideous creatures is just like being an ant outside, and I think that's what people kind of found horrifying, because there was these creepy monsters that you had no defense over and couldn't do very much onto, so the point of hiding from them or running away from them seemed to terrify quite a lot of people. From what I played of the second game, I think the second level, I think it is, with the school, was probably the freakiest one, and it ended up kind of screwing me over and terrifying me quite a lot. And I'm not a person to be terrified just from the sight of a monster. I'm terrified by the thought of what they're doing to me, and the teacher herself was just freaky and ended up screwing me over. But that could have just been I was in school when that released, and that's just what I played, and maybe that will freak me out again. If not, then it might have just been when I was in school. Now, what I think this game has over the others is the opportunity to expand its lore. Games like FNAF and Poppy's Playtime, even though I like Poppy, is really, really long lore. And I don't think I'm ever going to learn or attempt to learn any of it. And the thing with Little Nightmares is the lore is pretty contained in itself, that you can figure out one thing or just play the games. You don't need to read the books or the comics. You just need to do one thing. I know there is a podcast. I'm not sure how good it is, but I don't think I'm ever going to listen to that just because it doesn't seem like my kind of thing. But it's probably got its own lore, and it'll probably be good compared to everything else, because I like lore, and Little Nightmares lore has been probably the most consistent I've ever researched. In Little Nightmares itself, you can find a little bit of lore during the main game, but the best place to find lore is in the DLC. Now, the reason I made this video was to obviously explain why I believe Little Nightmares to be one of the best horror games ever made and will continue to be one of the best ever. The reason I did this was because obviously it's coming up to Halloween, and hopefully if I time it right, it should be either October 30th or 31st when this video releases. As well as it being that, it's probably one of my favourite games ever, and is one of the only games that I actually pre-ordered the sequel for, despite never actually playing it for longer than like 4 hours. I do think this is a very good kind of game to realise is one of the better games in the indie kind of dev titles. It's kind of there with like Inside, if you've ever played that and know what it is, but like all the rest of them don't stand out to me as much, and I believe this one is one of the heavy hitters that kind of like executes the game very well, and the horror is really exciting. And the best way to show you that is with the killers themselves, or the hunters, or whatever you want to call them. Personally, I think the best place to start is with the janitor, who I think people have nicknamed Roger. I don't know why, and I don't know at all why he's been named Roger, but he's one of the main antagonists during Little Nightmares itself. I think it's the end of chapter 1. And he's got like really long arms, but short legs. Like, I mean really short. To my knowledge, Roger is like completely blind and only has like sharp sense of smell, which is like every time Six does something, he can basically like smell or hear it. And that leads to him being one of the most unique ones, because he doesn't just run straight after you and you can hide from him and kind of defend against it, but he's kind of like a patrol for the more. I always thought him to be kind of the unique kind of like antagonist, and really hoped he kind of came back. He's kind of like Huggy Wuggy and Freddy Fazbear, even though they might not show up as much as the other ones. They're still probably the face of that brand, and I think that's what made him so special. He was always in the promotional art, and he was always the kind of scary person who kind of came in and like scared the hell out of me when I first played it, and I think he's the one that I remember most from the game, especially compared to people like the chef and the lady. There was a few other like antagonist type enemies, like the chefs, the leeches, the guests, and I think there's a granny in it. I'm not sure on them. I'll need to kind of go back and play it later on, but they were probably the ones that most people played against. The main enemy at the end is obviously the lady, who isn't really an enemy. You just need to shine a mirror at her, and it's very underwhelming. But to my knowledge, I don't remember what happened to one of the enemies, which is the twin chefs. I remember most of the other people getting kind of like a death animation, or kind of like trips and falls down something. Or at the end, like the guests, which I'll cover in a bit later on, because it's a bit more important than just a singular bit. But it's probably the chefs I can't remember, and I'll need to go back and play later on. Obviously, being a horror game, the monsters themselves aren't going to be the only scare you can find in the entire game. I think the setting itself is amazing and gives a lot of vibes that are like scary. Like there's a hanging man that's probably committed suicide, obviously, and there's the monsters, and I think the best part of it is generally walking through and seeing the size of the entire place and feeling a lot overwhelmed by the feeling of the Maw as a whole. I think the best place that does it is the Secrets of the Maw DLC, but obviously I'm going to cover that later on. I'm not sure how long to talk about this, because it's kind of like, it's just supernaturally, and I'm not very good at this, and it's not something I want to talk about for a long time. But at the end of the game, for spoilers, Six ends up eating the lady and basically kind of comes like corrupted and ends up killing most of the people who were on the ship. And it's kind of like the end of Inside, is the best to say it. You kind of kill everybody and then the game closes and ends. But the thing with it is that it's very dark and it doesn't tell you a lot about it. But the sense of insecurity that you have all the way through the game is gone at that moment while you're walking through, because none of them can kill you, and you just walk through badass, killing every single one of them all the way through. You do get a bit more information about the game later on with the Maw's DLC, which I'm not sure if I want to talk about in this video or not, because it's kind of like a separate thing, and It's quite a big DLC for what it is, because it's 3 episodes long, which are about an hour each. I might talk about them separately in a different video, just because why not, and I need a bit more time. I'm just going to add one thing at the end, which is I will probably make a separate video on both the Secrets of the Moor DLC for Little Nightmares 1 and the comics, maybe after I played Little Nightmares 2, but I'm not sure at the moment. I need to check what there is and what I can do with it. I'm definitely not doing the podcast because that will be extremely boring and probably hard to do, because with my knowledge of editing, that Sonic video was awful, but a lot of people watched it. But obviously, like, the audio was crap, and I need a bit more time to think of how to do stuff like that. I don't think the story in this one is necessarily, like, unique compared to a lot of them. I'm probably going to keep saying Inside quite a lot because that's what it reminds me of. But the game as a whole is amazing, and I'm going to try talk about it a bit more. This is like halfway through, I'm pretty sure at this point. And I'm probably going to talk about the main game itself in a bigger whole when I played all of the games, because there's definitely a lot more. But if you haven't played this game, it's worth it, and it's amazing as a game. I'm not sure what to talk about as a whole throughout the entire thing, because obviously it's not a game you can just talk about. You need to play it and understand it, and there isn't enough. I need to go through the comics as well, and that's the problem. They're free, I'm pretty sure, as well. If you haven't enjoyed this, then please leave. But if you have, then like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.